So you are the man who told me that I had 6 months to live.
I remember the look on your face. You were absolutely poleaxed.
When I saw your face, or what I could see of your face, I was like physically sick.
You've proved me wrong. You've proved me to be a
You're
complete
wrong.
liar.
There are not many people who can say that they've had their life saved by an Ewok.
Let's start a podcast about our mental health for no good reason why. Let's call it Mind Cake.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another slice of Mind Cake, the podcast where we talk honestly about mental health, life, loss, and the stuff nobody quite knows how to say out loud. Without all the therapy speak, without all the inspirational quotes, just real conversations with real people who have been through it. I am Lee Crompton, and today's guest is probably the only person whose mere presence once made me feel physically nauseous. Not because he's unpleasant, quite the opposite, but because during lockdown, sitting in a tiny room in a Glasgow hospital, Mr Omar Hilmi was the man who told me I had 6 months to live, which is quite the thing to hear from another human being. Especially when that human being is very calm, very kind, and very matter of fact about it. But before we get into all that, a couple of messages. Colin has been in touch. Hello, Colin. Following last week's episode with Joe at the Happiness Club, he says he loved it, although he did take issue with Joe's use of the word literally, quite literally, when she actually meant metaphorically. However, he did go on to describe himself in his own words, as a pedant of prick-sized proportions. So, Colin, self-awareness is everything, my friend. Keep up the good work. I actually met Colin recently in person, and I'm apparently 4 inches taller than he expected. Not quite sure what to make of that, but thanks again, Colin, I think. Who else? Ian, obviously, has messaged in, asking if me and Paul had split up, because we disappeared for a while. But no, we're back. We're sorry, but we are back. Although he's not here today. If you caught last Thursday's Mind Bite, you will already know that. If you didn't, go and have a listen after this. It's half an hour of me and Paul talking absolute nonsense about knitting, hypnotherapy, and a collie named Rock, which is either a good reason to listen or a fantastic reason not to. Only you can decide. But no, thank you for sticking with us. Genuinely, it means more than you know. Right then, back to the episode. And this episode isn't really about cancer. It's about honesty. It's about how doctors carry impossible conversations. And what happens when somebody detonates your entire understanding of mortality and the future. We talk about why Omar believes patients always deserve the truth. Why he recommended I read David Gemmell's Legend whilst I was shut in a lead-lined room at the Beatson, and we discover what Mr Hilmi does to unwind, including how he ended up in a Hollywood blockbuster. All will be revealed. So, let's check the oven and grab ourselves a slice of Mind Cake. Well, Mind Cakers, it's been a long time in the making, but he's finally here. Today we have the pleasure of chatting to a man who has arguably slit more throats in Glasgow than anybody else. It's Mr. Omar Hilmi. How are you, sir?
I'm absolutely fine. And yeah, interesting accolade. I mean, possibly true, but yeah, not one I'd want to spread around too much.
No, but if you're going to have that accolade, then Glasgow's a pretty good city to have it in, I'd say.
This is true.
This is true.
Hopefully, all in a good cause, though.
Well, there's the place to start. So you are the man who told me that I had 6 months to live.
Yeah,
How much of that conversation do you remember?
I remember the look on your face. You were absolutely poleaxed.
Mm,
I've got a certain policy with these things is that you're best to get the worst news out in the open from the very beginning.
yeah.
I don't try and honey things too much because it's not fair. The last thing you want to hear is, oh, something's going to go well. And then if it doesn't go as well as you're hoping, then that feels as if the world's falling in on you.
Yeah.
So I remember the room we were in. I remember you were sitting down. I remember telling you, and I remember the people that were around at the time.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's never an easy conversation. The person who it's worst for is, of course, you or the patient. But you deserve honesty, and there's no point in me trying to make my life easy by lying to you about it at that
Hmm.
point. I remember the occasion well, and you've proved me wrong. You've
I've
proved me to
proved
be a
you
complete
wrong.
liar.
Well, it was particularly odd because we were still in lockdown.
Yes.
So me and Gemma still had masks on.
Hmm.
And my overriding memory of that was seeing Gemma's eyes. When you said that I had to come into surgery on the Monday, more surgery. So I'd had my first surgery, and you said you got to come
Hmm.
in on. Oh, you got to come in on Monday. We're gonna COVID test you, but quite frankly, it doesn't really matter whether you're positive or not. If you're positive, my team will just have to take extra precautions. You'll come in on a Monday, and I remember Gemma kind of going, "Oh, so there's hope that we can do something here." And I remember you went knee to her and said, "No, no, you. I think you've misunderstood what I've said here." And I just remember the look in Gemma's eyes because, of course, we were all wearing masks. You could only see each other's
Hmm.
eyes. I mean, I don't know how long it was until I saw your face.
I think it was about 6 months because I remember when you did first see my face, it was, oh, so that's what you look like.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't recognize you, but I do know, and I have said to this before, that your eyes, if you like, and it's nothing personal, but it was the first few weeks when I saw your face or what I could see of your face. It had the reaction that I was like physically sick because I made the association between that news and those eyes, and I just wondered, do you get that a lot
Um, Not from patients, from my family,
from your
yes.
family? Okay.
I mean,
It's just
when my kids were younger, they used to say that I had angry eyes, and they knew when things were going wrong because suddenly there would be an expression, and it was the eyes that gave it. So it's possibly something like that.
dad eyes.
But yeah,
I want to counter that by saying that one thing that you do incredibly well, and I've watched you do it over the years with countless patients, is every time you come out, you make us feel like we're the only person that you're seeing that day. And I just wondered how intentional that is, or whether it's something you've kind of learned over time.
when I'm with the patient, they're the most important person there. It doesn't matter about anything else that's going on. It is you've got to give the best of your ability to the individual patient. And people know sincerity or not. If you're not concentrating on them, if you're not devoting your time and attention to them at that point in time, they will pick up on it and they will respond badly. It makes my life so much easier to just be sincere and do my best for each person at each time.
Mhm.
And yeah, people deserve good healthcare and they deserve to be listened to. And I don't have all the answers. And I frequently tell people that I don't know why you've got this symptom, but I'm not worried about you or something like that. But
Mhm.
I give them the best opinion that I can. And I hope that, yeah, they do respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, especially those early months, we'd have various conversations with various specialists and clinicians and people at Maggie's and whatever. And I know that mine and Gemma's default was, well, we'll wait to see what Mr. Hilmi says because we know he's not going to pull any punches. He's just going to tell us straight down the line exactly what we want to know, good or bad. So yeah,
To the best of my ability, yes. I can't claim I always get it right, but you'll get the best opinion I've got at any given time, hopefully.
absolutely.
Everyone in healthcare has their own opinions, and not everyone's opinion can be correct all of the time. And this is why it's often easier to have one person to listen to because people come from things that slightly different ways or
Yeah.
have subtly different opinions, and that creates confusion. If one person's saying one thing and one person's saying something else, well, who do you believe? And a lot of problems in the health service are communication related, of just too many opinions on a single subject, some of whom will have a high level of knowledge, others will be coming at things from a slightly different perspective. Both can be right, but just confusing the issue in the long run.
And then you've got the patient in the middle who, I'm talking more for myself in this instance, who as a little knowledge is dangerous. I remember when some of the first results came through, and you're looking at TSH and T4 and decimal points and whatever, and I'm like, I don't know what all this means. So you've got the patient in the middle who's maybe got a little bit of knowledge, which just muddies the water even further.
But yeah, it's you don't want to dive too deeply into that at that stage. We'd given you the news, we told you it was bad.
Yeah,
You didn't need to know any more than that. And like I said, you've proved us all wrong, which is
hmm.
fantastic. You got lucky.
I did get very lucky. I did get very lucky, and that segues nicely onto another moment of ours, which is when you suggested that I read Legend by David Gemmell whilst I was in my lead-lined room at the Beatson. Now, would you like to just briefly give an explanation as to why you thought that particular book might be of interest?
Well, first of all, it's a favorite of mine. I
Mm,
read it at medical school, first of all. Was recommended to me by a very good friend of mine, an anaesthetist who's unfortunately decided to go to Australia and works there, a guy called Pierre Bradley. And he said, "You've got to read this," when I was in my training. And he was right. I love the book. It's a very simplistic book in a lot of ways. I
mm.
mean, it's not as complex as the more modern fantasy novels,
I think
but
it
it
was
was
out in the
written
80s. It's
by,
quite an old book now, isn't it? I think it was out in the
oh,
80s or
yeah, it
something. Yeah, yeah.
is. Absolutely. But it was written by David Gemmell when he had a health crisis. He had a cancer diagnosis, and the premise of the story is the defense of a fortress, and there's overwhelming odds against it. And it was really him writing about his fight against cancer, and he
Hmm.
was the fortress, and how he survived against overwhelming odds. And you need something uplifting when you're in the midst of any diagnosis of cancer. You need to think,
Yeah.
okay, there's a way through. And yeah, I just thought it was a good one to read.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's something that resonated with me. It's something that I've always remembered. And I guess coming back to you saying about you have to be honest with folk, but at the same time, there's a balance, isn't there, between how much do patients need facts and how much do they need something to hold on to?
Absolutely.
And there was that balance, wasn't there, between I've told you this news, but you might enjoy reading Legend by David Gemmell because yeah, and I think he survived for many years afterwards, didn't he? I mean, he did die of cancer, I think, in the end, but it was years after that initial diagnosis.
Yeah, I don't think he died of cancer ultimately. I think he actually died of a complication of surgery, actually, which is probably not such a great.
But yes, he
Um,
survived that initial diagnosis and
Went to write many more books.
went on to write many more books. Yes, and that's when I learned for the first time that you're a fantasy fan. It's fair to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. I love fantasy novels and things like that.
Well, here we go. So if you've listened to a couple of the other episodes, you'll know that I sometimes ask some hard-hitting Jeremy Paxman type questions. Um, I have one of those from my daughter,
Okay.
my youngest daughter, who Erin, who was three at the sorry, she was 8 months old at the time I was diagnosed. She is now the ripe old age of 6, and she would like to know, as I said, I was going to speak to you tonight. She would like to know what is your favourite film. That's the most important question in her life. She wants to know, and I'm wondering, is it Lord of the Rings or similar?
Actually, no, it isn't. It's a difficult one. There's lots of films that I like. I'm going to have to fall back to my default, which is Kelly's Heroes.
Kelly series, which again I watched when I was in the lead line room, which was another recommendation from you. I
Absolutely.
hadn't seen it for years. Yeah, lovely.
No, it's a good romp, and yeah, it's just completely silly. But no, I do like watching Kelly's Heroes.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have my copy of Kelly's Heroes anymore because, as you know, anything that goes into the lead line room in the Beatson doesn't come back out of the lead line room in the Beatson. So, it had to stay there for other
Absolutely.
patients to enjoy. Um, Patients' reactions. Has a patient ever surprised you with how they've reacted? Because I mean, I know from my experience in that moment, as much as you say, "Oh, it's horrible to tell me," in that moment, it doesn't. really go in. Do you know what I mean? I didn't leave that room thinking, oh Jesus, I've got 6 months to live. It's just you're not. I remember like shaking my head a lot because it was like you're in a dream. So I just wondered, have you had any strange reactions to kind of bad news?
Everyone reacts to things in subtly different ways.
Yeah.
I've never had any what I would classify as bad reactions. Reactions are just their reactions, and
Hmm.
you've got to accept that from people. Given the same circumstances, people can react in very different ways, but most people want to know, okay, this is what's happening. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the point, is that no matter how bad things are with the diagnosis, generally speaking, we're always going to do something.
Yeah.
And you just concentrate on the small things that can get you further forward. I mean, in your case, we had the prospect of further surgery and further treatment.
Hmm.
That was something for you to hold on to. It's very rare that from first diagnosis, something is completely incurable. It does happen
Yeah.
sometimes, but even if something is incurable, there's ways of making life moving forward a little bit better.
Mm.
And that's where sort of palliative care and things like that come into it, but also palliative surgery, which people don't really recognize that much. But surgery can be done to, not for curative reasons, but actually to make people's lives better.
Hmm.
And we need to take a very holistic approach in that. So, yeah, I've never really had what I can say of is a really bad reaction. I've had people who are really upset. I've had people who are really angry, but I don't regard those as bad reactions. They're just
No, no.
reactions and completely understandable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult in that moment to process, but like you say, there's always, and I think that's what I found easier. And it's all relative, but it was easier when you had a plan and you go, right, in 2 days' time, I'm having surgery. Then I need to get better because I've got to get my injections before I go into the beats. And then there was a and you're only looking like a day, 2 days, 3 days max ahead. Because looking at the bigger picture, 3 months, 2 months, 3 months ahead, it was just too much of a head fuck. I mean, it's just you can't get your head around that. And I found it more difficult, I think, when I was out of the system. And kind of, well, what do I do now? Whereas other than having these short-term goals of this is you got an appointment on Tuesday, you're doing this on Thursday, you've got that on Saturday, and you had that kind of that consistency and that kind of I don't know distraction almost that you were in the loop.
Yeah, you're on the production line to get
You're on the
things
production line.
sorted, and then
Hmm.
suddenly you come to the end of it, and where do you go from now?
Yeah.
But of course, that is part of what we generally lay down with the diagnosis. The worst thing when you're giving a diagnosis is to say, well, we're not sure what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in my case, with the type of cancer that I'm dealing with, I can predict to people how we're going to go at any given step, and I can map it out for them at that stage. And that I think is very useful for people. So they know that there is a plan, they know what to expect, and it makes it easier to take. But as you say, you come to the end of that, and then suddenly, well, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
answer is hopefully just continue as you're doing,
Just carry on. Yeah. Yeah. If you're lucky. If you're lucky.
if you're lucky.
Is there or are there things that families ask that patients don't, or vice versa?
I'm going to revert back to my previous answer that every family and every person is an individual.
Hmm.
You occasionally get family members who want to try and collar you to one side and sort of level with me, doc, how long they really got.
Hmm.
And the simple answer is we very rarely know.
Yeah.
In worst case scenario, you can say, okay, well, in my experience, I doubt you're going to survive more than this length of time. But we can't give an exact. The one I hate is we don't want you to tell them, because I can't agree to that.
No, no.
The patient has the right to all knowledge
Hmm.
about what's happening with them. It doesn't matter what the family may feel is best for the patient, unless the patient turns around to me and says, I don't want to know, but I want you to tell X, Y, or Z. My priority is to the patient, and I've got to be open with them.
Yeah. It's been fascinating actually when I've been on the sort of say survival side of the fence, but still come around for appointments and just people watching in that room because I'm very conscious of whilst I watch you and Leslie and Professor Reed interacting with the people as you call them through, and like you say, almost as if they're the only person they're seeing that day, I'm also conscious that I'm not too upbeat, I guess, because you don't know who else is in that waiting room. And if someone else is in that waiting room in the position that I was in 5.5 years ago, you don't want, oh, hi, Mr. Hilmi, and a high five as you come down the corridor. I guess that moves on to the next question. Is it, you've told somebody bad news, you've had your hands in their neck, pulling bits and pieces about, and then you go in for a fish supper. Surgeons must be a strange breed because how do you manage to do that? Is it, can you manage to compartmentalize, or that's the crux of what I wanted to get you on, is how do you flip from doing what you do in the day to going home?
Yeah, that's a really difficult one. You do have to very much compartmentalize it. I mean, I've got a policy. I want to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't want to be worrying about the decisions and the actions I've taken during the day, which means that most of us are very obsessive, because I know almost all my colleagues are exactly the same. We're very obsessive about what we do. It's going to sound strange, but surgery is really good fun. It's a real challenge. You're
Yeah.
going in to do something, you've got set goals. It's going to be a challenge on each time. There is a tremendous camaraderie in the theatre environment. You've got the anaesthetic staff, you've got the nursing staff, you've got everyone else there, all working to do our very best for that patient. And there is a tremendous team spirit associated with that. And to a certain extent, it almost dehumanizes the situation.
Mm.
That's going to sound really weird, but you've not got direct interaction with the patient while you're operating.
No.
You've got your task, you've got your challenge, and you want to achieve it. It's actually far more of a personal relationship in the outpatient clinic than it is when
Yeah.
you're actually doing the surgery. And you just learn to create those barriers. But that's a really tricky question to answer. I've not thought about it in that way before.
Well, no, I'm just thinking, I presume, like you say, it must dehumanize it when you've got somebody. I mean, just the squeamishness of it, just regardless of anything else, the skill and, experience of actually knowing what you're doing, just the squeamishness of. But then I suppose that dehumanizes itself, because if you've got someone who lay in front of you who's, completely out of it, like you say, it's not like you're having a chat with them whilst you do. That must be in some ways worse if you've got someone who's got a local anaesthetic for some other procedure and you're having to talk to them and you know that they're awake whilst you're trying to do whatever you're trying to do to them. At least how long would I have been in for?
It's 1 to 2 hours, I think.
Right, but that is a lot. I mean, and how many of those are you doing a day?
Do about 4 or 5 a day.
Again, like for a concentration level. I mean, that's just.
That's why surgeons retire. It's not the skill and things like that. It's the eyesight and the concentration, being able to maintain it. This is why people give up ultimately. But yeah, no, I mean it does take concentration. But you've got to remember that if you're doing it a lot, then you get very used to it.
Muscle memory.
And yeah, it's like any skill. I mean, you watch a skilled plumber work, a skilled joiner work.
Hmm.
You watch anyone who's doing something and doing it well, they get very quick at doing it. And they've got them, as you say, muscle memory,
Hmm.
and you just work through it. And probably, yeah, at the time that we're doing surgery, we do compartmentalize the humanity side of things
Yeah.
off and do the job in front of us.
Hmm. Um, I've completely forgotten what I was going to ask.
I have those moments sometimes as well.
That's something that happen whilst you're doing surgery. What am I doing? Oh yeah, and I've got to cut this
No,
bit.
that doesn't happen during surgery, fortunately.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask. So, other than being a sci-fi nerd,
Mhm.
what does Mr. Hilmi do to relax?
I read, as you know.
Yeah.
I fly model aircraft,
Okay.
not drones, model aircraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy skiing, I go walking, just general stuff, nothing particularly special.
Have you ever flown any of your model aircraft up our neck of the woods? Because there seems to be a cohort of people who, by I think it's called Queen's View by the Wangy on the Stockymuir Road. There seems to be a cohort of people who, when the weather conditions are right, are always flying their model planes down the valley. It's not that's not
Yes,
you.
I am one of those
Oh, you
people
are one
that
of those
flies the
people.
Queen's View.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
Big shout out to Queen's View Model Flying Club.
Is that what they're called?
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah, they've even got their own website.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. I've probably passed you many times, going, look at these cars parked here,
Hooting your horn saying they're
hooting my
stopping the
horn.
road up.
Hmm.
Well, you should come down next time and say
I
hello.
will. I'll come down and say hello because it's like it looks like there's a little path that goes down to like a green area in the middle.
That's right. That's where we take off from.
Right. Okay. Right. Well, there you go. That's something else. Something else I've learnt tonight.
So
Now,
Saturdays and Sundays.
Saturday is what I will look out for you. I'll come down. I'll bring you a flask of coffee. I mentioned when I saw you last week
Hmm.
that I've written a play called
Yes.
Inevitable about getting my diagnosis. Clearly, as a major part of that story, you are in that play. I wonder how that felt from your perspective, being in somebody's story in that way, and if it ever made it to stage, would you play? Would you consider playing yourself?
Well, the first thing to say is it's been a real honor working with you in your personal play, and I'm very glad it's got a happy ending. Would I consider playing myself?
Well, the only reason, sorry, just jumping in there, the only reason I say that is because I know I have on good authority that you have acting experience.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
Do you
That
want?
was a long, long time ago.
Would you like to share
It
to
was
the
more
audience
singing
your
experience.
acting and singing? I mean, you do all the ticking all the boxes.
I was fortunate enough to go to a school that had a very strong singing tradition in Hertfordshire, a place called St Clement Danes. And there was a truly fantastic teacher there, Mr Walters, who had a relationship with the Royal Opera House and by inference also with various film companies. And so occasionally we would go and sing in the Royal Opera House in various operas. And I also had the opportunity to sing in Return of the Jedi as an Ewok.
As an Ewok.
Yes,
So, and am I right in saying that you sang at Darth Vader's funeral
as an Ewok, yes.
as an Ewok? Yes, yeah.
In the original, not in the remastered. They've cut it from the remastered, but
It's
in the
disgusting.
original, I know, it's disgraceful. To be
The other
honest,
thing,
it wasn't that great a song.
I've told that story to a few folk since I found out, and the first question that normally comes back is, "Wait, is Mr. Hilmi really short?" I'm like, "No, he was a child. He's not. He's not a very short man." But you're operating on me, sort of with your.
I was just singing, I wasn't acting. Bear that in mind.
So, did
We
you
went
meet
to Pinewood
meet
Studios.
anybody while you were doing it?
Yeah, we met George Lucas.
Wow.
Yeah, he was there. And we saw a brown out of the film before it was on general release, just the bit that we were in. And we still weren't any wiser as to what was going to happen, but yeah, it was a nice experience.
I bet it was. And so, as I say, you've got acting experience. It's like singing experience. So I'd say if it ever became a musical, then maybe I'll get back in touch.
Well, best of luck with it.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have sent it to my agent, and it made her cry. And I actually sent it to my. I see a clinical psychologist once a fortnight, Dr. Jan, who's been on the podcast before, and she cried as well, and said her words were she described it as, and I quote, beautiful.
Fantastic.
We'll wait and see what happens with that. But yes, there aren't many people who say, and I know you're gonna roll your eyes at this, because you're a very humble man, but there are not many people who can say that they've had their life saved by an Ewok. You asked me when things were looking a bit more rosy, did I ever play the lottery? And I said, why? And you said, because you've got higher odds of winning the lottery than you have of beating anaplastic thyroid cancer. So, I mean, I was in a small minority group anyway, and then I think even in an even smaller niche to have been saved by an Ewok Who can say
There
that?
you go.
Who can say that? Not many.
This is true. This is true. You're in a very select group on that.
Mr. Hilmi, thank you so much for giving up your time. That has been wonderful. Thank you for making my evening. Yes, keep on keeping on, because you are a remarkable human being.
Well, thank you very much. And I must admit, I'm very humbled to have been invited to take part in this. I was a little bit trepidatious. Like I said to you before, I normally prepare for doing any presentation a long time, and I wasn't sure it was going to be, but it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, what do you make of that? Pick the bones out of that, cakers. Felt all slightly surreal. Important, but surreal, because when someone delivers news like that to you, they stop feeling entirely human for a while. They become the diagnosis, the prognosis. They are the person that changed everything. So, sitting here 5.5 years later, having a cup of tea and talking about fantasy novels, Ewoks and model aeroplanes with Mr. Hilmi was a strange but genuinely lovely experience I wasn't fully expecting. The thing that stayed with me from the conversation was the balance between hope and honesty. He never pretended everything would be fine, but he also never treated me like I was already gone. And when your world is collapsing, that matters more than probably people realise. I also still find it absolutely staggering that a top-class surgeon can casually reveal that he sang at Darth Vader's funeral. If it's not on his CV, it certainly should be. And speaking of things that probably shouldn't be true but are, I want to leave you with this, because I've been thinking about it since we recorded. And my question is there such a thing as coincidence? Or is the universe just showing off and pulling my chain? Here is the evidence for the prosecution. So, all the way back, me and Paul met filming the proof of concept for a comedy I'd written called Game of Cones. I later invited Mr. Hilmi to the premiere, and it turned out that his anaesthetist's daughter was also in the cast, right? Which to me is bonkers. Okay, but small world, fine, coincidence, maybe. When I was then diagnosed with anaplastic thyroid cancer, I latched onto Han Solo's line, "Never tell me the odds." I can't do the accent, clearly. But it got me through some dark nights, and it turns out Mr. Hilmi, my surgeon, the man delivering those odds, was in Return of the Jedi as an actual Wookiee. Not metaphorically, Colin, literally an actual Wookiee. So hopefully I've used that correctly. And then, which I think we mentioned on the catch-up episode last week, Paul, who delivers rugs for a high-end cleaning company when he's not acting, turns to me and says, "Mr. Hilmi, is his name Omar?" And it turns out he was dropping off his freshly cleaned rugs the very next day. So, is all of that a coincidence? Or is the universe trying to tell us something? Now, I know what Paul would say, but he thankfully isn't here. So, I genuinely don't know. But I do know that 5 years ago, I was given 6 months to live. And I've now sat across from the man who said it. And we laughed about Ewoks for an hour. So, never tell me the odds. Massive thanks to Mr. Hilmi for being so generous with his time, his honesty, and his willingness to be associated with the podcast. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone you think might need to hear it. And if you want to get in touch, it's sliceofmindcake@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. And until next time, in the words of Dr. Jan, don't be a dick. Ta-ra!